numa folha qualquer eu desenho um sol amarelo. E com 5 ou 6 retas é fácil fazer um castelo.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at the Global Center Latin America in Rio, and we have Mr. Alec Milton from the admissions office of Columbia College, Columbia University in the city of New York. Mr. Milton, thank you very much for your presence here, and welcome to Rio de Janeiro.
Thank you again for welcoming me back to Rio. This is about my 7th or 8th trip to Brazil and 7th or 8th trip to Rio, and it's always a great experience when I'm able to come, meet students from the region, and also get a chance to see you all and be very much a part of the Columbia Global Center here. Thank you.
Alec, tell us a little bit about your experience in Brazil in general and the history of your travels through Brazil. What you've seen, what you like, and what kind of people you've met.
Sure. We first started traveling to Brazil as a part of the Council of International Schools educational tour that went through Latin America, and we would always make a great stop in Brazil and spend a few days visiting schools, meeting with students and parents, families who had an interest in applying to schools in the United States. We did that trip for a couple years, and then about 5 years ago, Columbia, along with a couple of our peer institutions, decided to start traveling in Brazil and the rest of Latin America as a group of 3. Over the years, what I've seen in terms of the growth and development of Brazil, in addition to it becoming more expensive every year that I've been here, we're able to see incredibly strong students from all over the country. Not just Sao Paulo, Rio, but all the way up in Manaus. We're visiting a number of cities this year. We've been to Brasilia, Fortaleza, Salvador. In the years, we're hoping to visit all of the major cities here in Brazil and visit high schools and do a number of programs where we're trying to attract the best and the brightest students from all over the Brazil to consider Columbia, a Columbia education.
And Mr. Milton, how the international students coming from Brazil, we know that the competition is tough. How are the Brazilians performing at Columbia, and how do the students from Rio de Janeiro adapt to the international environment of Columbia University in the city of New York?
So I think our students who are coming from Brazil and Rio especially, they're fitting right in at Columbia University. They are leaders on campus. They're doing exceptionally well academically. So I think you all can have great confidence that your schools here are preparing students for a world-class education. So we've very much enjoyed the students who have come to our campus, and I think our professors would say exactly the same thing. They're bringing an incredible voice, an incredible perspective of not just Brazil, but all of Latin America, and they're bringing that to our campus. And they're expressing those voices and perspectives in classes, in research laboratories, in internships that they're able to hold in New York City and various places around the world that they've been traveling to.
Alec, tell me, what does it mean to you, the phrase Global Columbia?
So Global Columbia, I think, has several components to it. There's certainly Columbia University in the city of New York, and New York City is a global city. We have immigrant populations from all over the world that come to live and grow in the city of New York. And I think Columbia is very much a part of that. When you look at Columbia's international student body, we are the 5th largest international student population of any university in the United States. Among our undergraduates, about 18% of the Columbia undergraduate class are international students from over 90 different countries around the world. So in a lot of ways, we think that we reflect New York City in the sense of our global diversity. But it's not just what we're bringing to campus to help students understand and be a part of a global community, but it's the way that Columbia University extends itself around the world. our undergraduate students have access to over 200 different study abroad programs where they can study anywhere in the world, and quite a few of them will actually come down here to Brazil, whether they're Brazilians returning or American students or students from other citizenships around the world who are coming down to Brazil to do research, to take classes at local universities. There are things like that that our students are doing. And then probably the third area that I think is incredibly important are the Columbia Global Centers, 8 footprints that we have all over the world where there's a great Columbia experience connecting to local politicians, local municipalities, research opportunities, internships. And we have a great one here in Rio that a number of our students will have access to in terms of their both return to Brazil and coming to Brazil to further their global experience as well.
And Alec, if you were to choose, say, 2 top topics, 2 top issues that you think that the initiative of President Lee Bollinger and his strong support for the global centers, Columbia Global Centers around the world, how the global center in Rio helps the admissions offices at Columbia University?
I think one of the main things that President Bollinger has spoken about in terms of the Global Center reach is our ability to make use of Columbia resources to help different communities around the world solve some of the problems that they have. We think it's a great learning opportunity for our students to be involved in those research opportunities, in the opportunities to really be a part of a growing community around the world that's solving some very unique problems, whether those problems be with environmental issues or research projects. Columbia has had, in addition to the Global Center in Rio, we've had a teaching and research opportunity up in the Amazon every year. And so I think President Bollinger's idea of a global footprint, global partnerships, are very much a part of that Global Center initiative. We do things a little bit differently from other universities. We don't have schools abroad. Actually, not cut that. While we don't have schools abroad, we like the idea of our students being a part locally of the endeavors that are taking place here.
And how that helps the admissions at Columbia University? I
think when students are looking for an opportunity at Columbia in New York, they're not limited in their thinking. They're not thinking, I'm just going to study in New York City, but how am I going to get a global education? And I think it helps our admissions process when I can talk about Columbia's various endeavors around the world, even though I'm speaking to an international student who might be coming abroad to study at Columbia in New York City. That we let students know that Columbia is very much out there in the world. And while you're in New York City, you're actually getting a global experience. And I think that's very exciting to prospective students. It's very exciting to families who will know that their sons and daughters will have a presence on the global stage, thinking about the opportunities that they'll be able to grow into for years to come. And it's not a singular New York City experience.
Alec, as you know, there are over 80 international Columbia alumni clubs worldwide, with more than 300,000 alumni participating. How can they get involved with Columbia College admissions?
The chief way that we would love to see more alumni get involved with the undergraduate admissions process is through the alumni representative community. Through what we call ARC, alumni have an opportunity to interview students from all over the world who are interested in a Columbia education. And we value the ARC because of the incredible perspective that those alumni are able to give both to prospective applicants, but also when we read their reports on those interviews, we can actually factor those reports into the admissions process as we're reading and discussing in our admissions committee. So the ARC, I would think, is one of the chief ways that our alumni could support the work of the admissions office. And I know that you've been an ARC member for a number of years here in Brazil. Can you tell us about your experience as an ARC member?
It's been a real pleasure for me to serve on the ARC committee. First of all, I get to meet students from all walks of life and hear about their dreams, their aspirations, and what Columbia means to them. Also, I get to think about what Columbia means to me, what value its education has had in my life. And it's always a good conversation to have with the students, regardless of where they're from or what stage they are in their lives. It's nice to hear young people talk about what's important to them and what their expectations are.
So whenever we hear from our students, especially when they get on campus and they reflect on the application process, one of the things that they value the most is interacting with alumni. And I think alumni who've certainly had experience either living, being born in, or researching from the region that they're applying from, that connection of being able to show that you made it through Columbia and that you had such a wonderful experience, that really connects with young people as they're applying and deciding between Columbia and some great institutions from around the world. So I thank you for your work in ARC, and hopefully we can get more alumni who are living locally involved in the process as well.
And tell me a little bit, when the students do arrive on campus and they're transitioning to life in New York, I think as a mother, one thing I would worry about is, how that transition occurs and what sort of programs Columbia has for families, not just for students.
Right. So through the Office of Student Affairs, there's the Office of Family Programming. So it starts very much before students even enroll in Columbia. During the summertime, there are a number of what we call Columbia 101 programs where students, the faculty and staff from Student Affairs will travel around the world to help students get acclimated, sort of like a pre-orientation program, get acclimated to the Columbia community by meeting their advisors for the first time, meeting other alumni. We have a number of what we call send-off programs around the world where students will have an opportunity to meet other Columbia students who are going to Columbia during that same academic year. The Office of Family Programs, I know that they contact parents to see how parents might want to get involved in the Columbia community, stay connected with their sons and daughters while they're students at Columbia as well.
Mr. Alec Milton, I have a question for you regarding admissions and college prep. We know that the competition is tough. We know that Columbia College alone has over 33,000 applicants for a little bit more than 2,000 spots. So you are definitely looking for the best. How are the Brazilian students pairing up with the competition, with the international competition? Because we know that at the international slice of the students that are being admitted, Brazilian students are competing with the best Japanese, with the best Chinese, the best Brits, Germans, South Africans, Australians. How are the Brazilian students comparing, and are the Brazilian schools delivering?
Students from Brazil are incredibly well prepared for a Columbia education. And as I mentioned before, I've been traveling to Brazil for almost a decade now, visiting a number of different schools, public, private, international schools. And there are Brazilians very well represented on Columbia's campus. And those students are in a number of different disciplines. There are Brazilian students at Columbia Engineering as well as Columbia College, Brazilian students that are involved in the STEM fields, Brazilian students who are very much involved in the arts, journalism, in the humanities as well. Our Brazilian students are among some of our stronger students on campus, and they have an absolutely wonderful voice and perspective that they bring. I know Brazilian students who have been involved in the CERN project, the Large Hadron Collider, a young woman who is an amazing scientist. We've had Brazilian students who have worked at the United Nations, interned on Wall Street, interned in non-for-profit organizations, Brazilian students who've brought arts and culture and literature to the campus as well. So Brazilian students are very well represented among our international student body. They have been for quite some time, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor as Brazilian students are graduating from the university in quite a few numbers every year, returning home to Brazil and becoming among our stronger alumni from all over the world who are very much involved. So you're going to see Brazilian students here in Rio who are alumni of Columbia College and Columbia Engineering. You're going to see Brazilian students from Sao Paulo, from Manaus, from Porto Alegre, from Curitiba, Londrina, who are all graduating within the last few years, who are going to, we think, come back and help Brazil continue to grow and become the great nation that it is.
Do students have an opportunity on campus to hear the voices and think about the opinions of international leaders?
So there are a number of different programs that Brazilian students have actually started while they were undergraduate students. The program that I've heard most recently about is a Brazil conference that's taking place every year. They just had their inaugural program this year, a conference on Brazil in the Ivy League. And I think those students are very much leaders on our campus. And it's not just Brazilian students who are going to this conference. It's students who have a very strong interest in the growth and development of Latin America as a whole.
And Alec, do you have an advice for students that dream going abroad, going to New York, studying in the United States?
I think whenever I come to Brazil and I speak with families who are interested in a U.S. education and a Columbia education specifically, two of the things that I really like to highlight, in addition to the incredible, wonderful resources that students are able to make use of at a world-class research university. The two things that I really focus on are, one, the idea of an urban education, an urban environment. If a student likes going to school in Rio or in Sao Paulo, we think you're going to love going to school in a city like New York. An incredibly diverse city, an incredibly well-built city, where students from the arts to engineering and applied sciences are going to be able to practice their skills and make use of those skills serving a worldwide community. So an urban environment like Columbia, we think, has something for everyone in a lot of ways. So think about whether or not you want to be an undergraduate student who goes to school at a residential liberal arts college and all of the things that that offers, a great life outside of the classroom, on campus as well as off campus, if that's exciting to you. The second thing that I think is, that I like to highlight is our core curriculum. Columbia has the oldest curriculum of its kind in the United States, and we think it's something incredibly important for students to really think about. Our philosophy is relatively simple. We think that a well-educated person has read certain books and tackled certain ideas no matter what they're going to major in, no matter what career interests they might be thinking about. So when we look at books that are a part of our core, from the Iliad and the Odyssey all the way through modern and contemporary literature that you take in your first year-long great books class, we ask students to be excited about that, the prospect of reading great literature and discussing that literature with students from different perspectives from all over the world who might have varying majors. If that's exciting to you, then I think a Columbia education is going to be an exciting place to go to school.
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because my son has been involved in this initiative, the Brazilian Undergraduate Student Council. And not only do they advise Brazilian students from all over Brazil on the application process and the transition to studying in the US, but they also organized their first conference this year at Harvard, where they had speakers from Jorge Paulo Lemann, a businessman, a philanthropist, to young students, young Brazilians who are involved in politics, and those Brazilians who are involved in organizing movements, social movements throughout Rio de Janeiro particularly, And it was very exciting because I think that it was a good turnout, and the audience included, the participants were not just Brazilian undergraduate students from the US, but students from all different kinds of nationalities and different programs who were interested in topics related to the Brazilian economy, our political future, and our culture as a country, our warm and welcoming culture here.
And my understanding is that they're expecting a much bigger and better conference next year when it's going to be held at Columbia University.
At Columbia University, that's the goal. That's my understanding as well.
One of the things that I think is most important about understanding the Columbia experience is not what I, as an admissions officer, has to say about Columbia, but we think it's incredibly important that students and families hear from current students about their Columbia experience and what Columbia means to them. So we always like asking our students to kind of reflect on their Columbia experience. And so we have a few students that are going to answer some questions for you in terms of their experiences at Columbia. And one of the chief questions that we always ask is, tell us about your experience in New York City and at Columbia University in New York City. Do you have what we would call an only Columbia moment or an only New York City moment? Tell us a little bit about that.
One of my most memorable experiences during my transition period at Columbia University was actually meeting individuals just like myself who were studying abroad in an American university for the first time. Many of these individuals, just like me, had the same emotions, were nervous or anxious, but at the same time, we were able to bond during our experiences, bond over our challenges, as well as become better human beings, better thinkers, and better individuals as we become global citizens of our new world.
I think one of my most rewarding endeavors at Columbia was when I participated in the Global Center's 2012 roundtable discussion on sustainable cities. And there I got to discuss with graduate level students, with professors, and the head of the Global Center in Paris on what would make such a city. And what made that experience so rewarding was the fact that they valued the input that I had to offer and how I used Rio de Janeiro as an example of an environmentally sustainable city.
Tell us a little bit about what your experience is with the Columbia Core curriculum. How has it been an enhancement on your undergraduate education? What was your experience when you came to Columbia that first time? And was there such a way that the Core built a different kind of community for you?
My experience with the Columbia Core was very beneficial in the sense that I got to study a lot of books and a lot of topics that I wouldn't normally cover in my major. And while doing so, I got to meet some very interesting people who studied different majors than I did, and people who I don't think I would have normally met if I had not taken the Core.
My experience with the Columbia Core was, of course, at times challenging, but mostly rewarding. I was able to engage myself with various texts written by various individuals from various nationalities in various time periods who were grappling with various conundrums, various ideas that were challenging at that point in time. Now, as students, as persons, or as individuals who wish to become future intellectuals, it was our imperative to actually grapple with these texts once more and actually take as much information as possible in order to uplift ourselves intellectually and academically.
Tell us a little bit about the most positive experience that you've had in terms of your transition here from Rio or from Brazil in general to Columbia. How was that transition for you as an international student?
My expectations coming from a small island called Jamaica meant that I was, of course, not accustomed to the American culture or to a city life. Now, despite these differences, despite my fears, and despite the anxiety that I experienced actually landing in New York, actually moving myself from one country to another, I was able to adjust myself quite readily, thanks partly to the administration, and on the other hand, thanks partly to my peers, especially those who became my friends. I was able to, of course, adjust my expectations, but at the same time have wonderful experiences that I will treasure for the rest of my life. Now, despite all of these trepidations, one must always remember that you should be prepared for the unexpected, and of course I was prepared for the unexpected, and that helped greatly in ensuring that I had the best experience I was able to have in a new country, in a wonderful city, in a wonderful part of the world. Thank you very much.
I think coming in as a high schooler, I feared that I'd be a small fish in a very large pond coming to Columbia in the middle of New York City. But after first few weeks, you start to realize how incredibly nice and friendly all the people are, the other students, how supportive all the teachers are, and how intriguing all the material is you're learning. So you really start to realize that you are studying in the best college, the best university, and the best city in the world.